U.S. interpretation severely distorts and exaggerates China's measures, intentionally causing unnecessary misunderstanding and panic.
It's obvious that these controls are part of a broader plan by China to control the world's supply chains. And these controls are wildly out of proportion to any targeted actions by the United States or its allies over the past few months.
Speaking of Li Wenke, he made some very radical comments on August 28th.
The U.S. statement seriously distort the facts. From August 27 to 29 local time, Li Chenggang, the international trade negotiator and vice minister, went to the United States to discuss with the U.S. side the implementation of the consensus reached during the call between the heads of state of China and the United States regarding China-U.S. economic and trade relations. Exchanging communication on issues such as the consensus of China-US economic and trade talks and the US Section 301 investigation restrictions on China's shipbuilding and other industries. Raise the issue with the United States.
He came to Washington, D.C. without being invited.
Has consistently engaged in consultations and communication with the US regarding the Section 301 investigation restrictions, maintaining a constructive stance, and has proposed relevant cooperation suggestions. However, the US side has a negative attitude and insists on implementing restrictive measures, so the Chinese side has to take countermeasures, including legally and in accordance with regulations charging special port fees on US-related vessels.
Li Wenke said that China would cause global chaos if tariffs were imposed on its ports.
The United States Section 301 investigation and restrictive measures on China's shipbuilding and other industries are typical unilateral and protectionist actions, severely damaging the relevant Chinese industry interests. Will also drive up inflation in the United States, harming the competitiveness and employment of American ports.
This was just mentioned. My first question is whether this is related to the Chinese side's response.
I must particularly point out that the implementation of the US measures has indeed affected the stability of the global supply chain, causing chaos in the global shipping industry.
Was there any progress in this negotiation in Washington, D.C.? The Chinese countermeasures are passive defensive actions to maintain a fair competitive environment in the international shipping and shipbuilding market. No. Cheats. A necessary move. China hopes the United States can recognize its own wrongful actions, work together with China, and return to the correct path of dialogue and consultation. Local authorities intervened in the case involving a subsidiary of Wentai Technology.
China firmly opposes the broadening of the national security concept by certain parties using administrative means to directly interfere in the internal affairs of enterprises. This action not only violates the spirit of the contract and market principles, but will also seriously harm the business environment, harming others.
What is the Ministry of Commerce's response regarding Nexperia's operations?
This action by the other party is a clear example of the US penetrating rules and harming the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises. The US penetration rules are the originators of harm to Chinese enterprises.
United States Trade Representative Greer at the press conference on October 15th.
The recent introduction of rare earth export control measures by the Chinese side is a legitimate action to improve its own export control system based on laws and regulations, aimed at preventing the illegal outflow of rare earths and their illegal use in weapons of mass destruction and other improper purposes. Better safeguard China's national security and global common security.
The measures will impact global semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and smartphones.
The U.S. interpretation severely distorts and exaggerates China's measures, intentionally causing unnecessary misunderstanding and panic. In fact, the U.S. extraterritorial jurisdiction measures have been in place for decades.
Is it about the United States implementing on Chinese products?
The U.S. side statement is projecting its own perspective, which precisely proves that the U.S. itself is continuously broadening the concept of national security, the security and stability of the global supply chain. It requires the joint maintenance of all countries in the world, including the United States.
We have repeatedly clarified our position on rare earth export control policies. China implements export controls on relevant items in accordance with the law to better maintain world peace and regional stability and fulfill international obligations such as non-proliferation, which is also in line with international practices. I am willing to strengthen dialogue and exchange on export controls with all countries to maintain the security and stability of the global production and supply chain.
Last Wednesday evening, China announced a sweeping expansion of its export controls on rare earth elements and rare earth processing equipment, as well as technologies related to batteries, vehicles, industrial diamonds, and superhard materials. To be clear, this is not just about the United States. These actions, if implemented, would apply to the entire world. China's announcement is nothing more than a global supply chain power grab. While China has taken a number of retaliatory trade actions against the United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, and others in recent years, this move is not proportional retaliation. It is an exercise in economic coercion on every country in the world. At its core, China's new measures include a rule saying that any product of which more than 0.1% of minerals consist of minerals mined or processed in China, one must seek approval from the Chinese government before trading it. Since many important semiconductors, for example, have these critical minerals, and semiconductors are in nearly everything, this rule gives China control over basically the entire global economy and the technology supply chain. Many are suggesting that China's action is simply posturing for leverage in negotiations with the United States. While that may be one element of China's approach, it's obvious that these controls are part of a broader plan by China to control the world's supply chains. And these controls are wildly out of proportion to any targeted actions by the United States or its allies over the past few months.